So, Sid, you are trained as a medical doctor, and you're a Rhodes Scholar, and life has gone pretty well for you. Why do you work so hard trying to write books that are winning Pulitzer Prizes and so forth? Why not just be a doctor and just serve your patients?
Well, I think that the books also serve patients. And I think it's important to understand that there are many ways that you can serve patients. One of them is by bringing them into the world of medicine, and that I think of my writing as part of my practice of medicine. I don't think they're different.
All right, for those who aren't familiar, you were born in
Delhi, in India.
And you went to college at Stanford.
I did.
You won a Rhodes Scholarship, and you got your medical degree where?
At Harvard.
Harvard, okay. And you're an oncologist.
I'm an oncologist, yes.
And you're practicing medicine now while you also do writing and other things, right?
Right.
Okay, so your first book, major book, won the Pulitzer Prize. And it's hard to write your first book and win the Pulitzer Prize, but you did. It was called Cancer, the Emperor of All Maladies. So what is the chance that anybody in this audience is going to get cancer if they live to be 75 years old?
Well, the numbers are on the order of 1 in 3 and 1 in 4. So 25%, 30%.
So cancer has been around forever?
Forever, yes.
And where does the word cancer actually come from?
It comes from the Greek word karkinos, for crab. And people thought that kind of a tumor buried under the skin looked like a crab buried under the sand.
So for somebody, the most deadly cancer, is that glioblastoma? Is it pancreatic cancer, liver cancer? What is the worst kind of cancer you can get in terms of survival rate?
What a morbid conversation. But
I'm going to ask you about better cancer. So are any of those, I mean, if you get those things, you got a tough problem, right?
Yes, I know, and there's so many things we can talk about. Car accidents, falling off the roof.
Okay. All right, but like if somebody says, I have prostate cancer, today you can, if it's not spread, you can probably get reasonable treatment and live, right?
That's correct, yeah. There are many cancers that have changed. I mean, an important statistic to remember is that the mortality from breast cancer for women has been decreasing by about 1% every year for the last 25 years.
So if you detect...
So over 25 years, it's decreased by about 25%. Now that sounds like 1% sounds like a small number. 25% to 30% over the last 3 decades is a big number.
Stage 1. If you detect...
No.
Oh,
this is
okay.
Overall mortality from breast cancer, period.
But if you detect breast cancer in stage 1, you have a 97, 98%?
Correct.
Okay. Why is it that certain cancers, the ones I mentioned, you typically only know that you have them in stage 4, like pancreatic cancer? Why is that?
They tend not to cause symptoms, and they tend to only present at advanced stages. I mean, other cancers you can detect often have symptoms. You feel X, Y, or Z, and that's why you go to your doctor.
So if I wanted to not have cancer, do you not drink alcohol, not eat meat, go to church every Sunday? What is it that you do that prevents you from getting cancer?
Going to church will not prevent you from getting cancer. So you could still go to church, but...
Synagogue, maybe? I don't know, but okay. All right, so the best way to prevent getting cancer, of any type of cancer, is to lead a clean life, don't drink alcohol, don't eat.
The best way to prevent any kind of cancer is to stop aging and stop getting old.
Oh.
So that would be
But what about genes? The best way to prevent having cancer is to have parents who didn't have cancer, is that right? Genes?
No, I mean obviously the current ideas about preventable cancers is that genetics is a contributor, and absolutely a contributor. But when we think about cancer, we really think about preventable causes and non-preventable causes. So genes are non-preventable causes. You don't choose your parents.
Right.
Your parents might choose you, but you don't choose your parents. So that would be among the non-preventable causes of cancer.
Okay. Now, as an oncologist, you presumably have to tell patients sometimes they have cancer. How do you do that?
I never tell patients they have cancer.
What?
No, that's a joke.
You don't tell them that, or?
No. I'm totally joking.
Okay.
Yes, of course. It's the central occupational hazard of my job.
So you tell people, look, you're a nice person, but you have cancer. And how do you do that gracefully?
That is not the way I tell them.
Well, what do you tell them? What do you tell them?
Usually, by the time they've come to see me, their suspicion is already heightened because you're knocking on the door of an oncologist and not a dermatologist. So usually, the conversation begins with, you know, doctor, what are my chances? What kind of cancer? You know, what stage of cancer do I have? How long am I going to live, and so forth. The conversation that I really want to have around those issues, not around what medicines they're taking, is I typically ask them to undergo a series of exercises, which I think are very important. One is I ask them to forgive themselves.
It's not their fault?
It's not their fault, yeah. I ask them if they need to forgive someone as an exercise to sort of get rid of a lot of guilt around what's going to happen next, because the journey often is very tumultuous. That starts from that first meeting. I ask them if they need to tell someone that they love them, or if they need to be told by someone that they are loved. A lot of this comes as part of faith building, relationship building with patients.
The best way to know if you have cancer is to go to get an annual physical, or do you recommend annual physicals to know if you have cancer or something else?
So annual physicals tend not to pick up most cancers. There are cancer detection focused ideas. Annual physicals tend not to pick up most cancers.
There is a view that there are certain dogs that can smell cancer in people. What do you think of that theory?
Not particularly convinced. I'm convinced they can pick up food in my airplane bag, but
Okay.
not particularly convinced that they can pick up cancer in my body.
So how did your life change when you won the Pulitzer Prize for writing this book? All of a sudden, you're not only a well-respected oncologist, but you're a famous author. So did you have to spend more time outside of the medical world, or did you not do that?
No, I did. You know, as I said, I mean, I don't think of my writing as sort of separated from my practice as a physician. So, you know, yeah, I suppose I took it in stride as part of the thing that I had to do.
But it seems as if cancer is on the rise, or at least the incidence of cancer. Is that because people are living longer, or we're better in detecting it, or is cancer not on the rise?
Cancer incidence is on the rise, which is mostly because we, as a population, are aging. So as the entire population cohort ages and as other diseases fall, cancer will naturally seem on the rise. The second reason is that it's also on the rise because we're detecting it earlier. The third reason is that you know, there are new carcinogens in the body. But here's a very important fact, and please make note of it. Cancer deaths, adjusted for age, adjusted for this age and population, has been on the fall and has been on the fall for the last 10 odd years.
Why is that?
Well, because we're getting better at preventing some of it. We're getting better at detecting some of it early, and partly because we're getting better at treating it. It's a triangle. Cancer, think of cancer as a triangle. Prevention is the base of the triangle. Early detection is the middle, and treatment is the top.
Your second book was on genes. Now, for thousands of years, humans didn't know that there were genes that existed and that were determining the way we would live and so forth, or how we would grow into humans, and certain things we would have characteristics. What is the essence of your book on genes trying to convey to people? What is the main message out of that book you want people to take away?
Well, there are a couple. One of them is that the idea of inheritance the book is not just about genes. It is about the idea of inheritance. And it's an intimate history, as the book is subtitled. But the last part of the book, actually this is true for the last part of all my books, the history often acts as a preamble. It guides you through a journey so that you can understand what's happening next. People often ask me, if I'm a medical historian. I'm actually, in some ways, not. I like to think about the medical future. I'm a medical futurist. It's the last part of the book that's, to me, the provocative part of the book. Once we learn how to read and write genetic information, by read, I mean understand, decode the material that is in our genes, the information. And by write, I mean change that information. What's going to happen to us? What is going to happen to us as humans? And so there's a section which I often recommend people read called Post-Genome. That is not to say that you shouldn't read the 300 pages that are before, because to understand what happens next, you need to understand what's happened before.
So when we mapped the human genome, did that really have the beneficial effects for society that were predicted or not?
Initially, I think there was a lot of hype around and a lot of hope around mapping the genome. It took about 10 to 15 years for us, and it is now starting to become, really palpable. We're beginning to intervene on genetic diseases, beginning to risk stratify patients based on their genetics, predict patients who may have a higher risk of breast cancer or ovarian cancer, and then treat them accordingly based on their risk. So yes, finally it is beginning to pay off in the way that it was expected to pay off.
All right, your current book is The Cell, The Song of the Cell. What is the cell, and why did you want to write a whole book about a cell?
Well, the cell is the unit of life. It's the basic unit of life. Often we talk about sort of, genes as being the unit of life. The genes are lifeless without cells. These books form a trilogy, and there'll be a last fourth book as part of a quartet. And they are what I would call, I call them the life trilogy. They are about, in some ways, the gene is the first book. It's like Star Wars. There's a prequel to the prequel to the prequel. But the gene is the first book. The cell is the second book. The cell is the unit of life. It is what makes us. And so, hence, I thought, no one had written a book about the cell. And so I thought, why hasn't anyone written a book about the cell? So I should write it.
Now, Jennifer Doudna won a Nobel Prize for what's called CRISPR technology, which means that she figured out a way in humans to be able to change their, cells in certain ways.
Genes, and by changing genes, change cells.
Okay, but right now we're not allowed under laws in every country, I guess, to actually say, we want to have a baby with blue eyes, and now I'm going to change the genes. Why are we not allowed to do that?
Well, first of all, it would be impossible to do that because most human traits, blue eyes, color of hair, how tall you are, et cetera, are influenced by hundreds of genes and on the order of billions of cells. It would not be easy to change hundreds of genes and billions of cells. It would be impossible with the tools we have.
Theoretically, we could do some things to change some characteristics that people have. Is that right?
That's right, and there are quite few actually. So those would be things that are controlled by single genes. Usually, yes, we could change those characteristics. They tend to be few. There are not very many, but they do exist. And yes, you could potentially change those. And we have now, as a community, have decided that before we do any of that, before we tamper with our genomes in a way that's heritable, that can be transmitted across generations, that we should pause and think a little bit more deeply about it.
There was a Chinese medical researcher who did an experiment which was not authorized in China, and he was put in jail for this. He was trying to, I guess, prevent a baby from having, was it AIDS?
Yeah, so it was a terrible experiment for terrible reasons, badly conceived. In every way, it was a botched. The whole idea was terrible from the start. The babies had no risk of getting AIDS. They were at zero risk, but they were at risk for developing, some complications of these genetic manipulations. So it's ethically an incredibly bad idea to try to do this.
Okay, in our lifetime, or let's say in the next 50 years or so, do you think it's likely that we will be editing genes in a way where people will go to the store or doctor and say, I want to have a child of this characteristics with a lot of brain power, or a good athlete, and you think that'd be possible in the next 50 years?
I think the possibility is 0.
0.
Yes.
Oh. Well, okay, well, I'm more
But
interested.
which one did you want? Which one of those things?
Well, I'm more interested in whether somebody 74 could live to be 94 and be in good health.
Well, so that goes back to this book, which is that it's not you're not going to be changing your genetic code. What you're likely to be able to change is the way genes are expressed in your cells. In order, if you wanted to live to 100, or if you wanted to change the aging process, again, you're not going to be able to tamper with your genetic code. You're much more likely to be able to achieve this by going to your doctor or to your neighborhood store, as you put it, and try to change the behavior, the composition of your cells, the way your genes move and express themselves in your cells. So it's aging is a genetic problem, but really it is a cellular problem.
Well, in aging, why do you think it was that evolution, or whatever is the reason why we kind of age to a certain level and then we ultimately die, why is it necessary that people age to the point where they do die, or why can't people live forever?
Well, so organisms so it's interesting. Trees are very interesting with this in this regard. Trees don't die of aging. They usually die of diseases. They don't go through the same aging process that we do. At least that's what we think. They succumb to a disease. If you think about, and it's going to take a little bit longer to answer this question. If you think about people who live for a very long time, so-called super centenarians, they don't die of cancer or heart attacks. They die of the failure of regeneration. They die because their bones can't regenerate, their cartilage doesn't, so they die of bones breaking. They die of stem cell failure, their blood system doesn't regenerate. They die of immune collapse. So what's really the issue in terms of the frontier of aging is there are really two frontiers. One of them is the conquest of disease, cancer, heart disease, and so forth, neurodegenerative diseases, et cetera. But then there's a second door, or the second frontier, which is how do we keep ourselves regeneratively alive? How do we keep our neurons regeneratively alive? How do we keep our blood system regeneratively alive? And it becomes a stem cell problem. It's a cellular problem at that stage.
The title of this talk was supposed to be The New Human. So 50 years from now, what will the new human be? Will the person be living longer, be stronger? What will the person be?
Well, in the Western world, they'll almost certainly be living longer. They will be living in different circumstances. We've already seen the devastation that we may cause if we don't stop living the way that we're living. Ecological devastation, among other things. But they will be, if we do live longer, we'll have to figure out how to also live better and live in peace with each other and with nature. They will probably acquire different kinds of characteristics. We talked a little bit about backstage about the fact that every year we come closer to a more bionic stage or more bionic state. And by bionic, I mean a state in which the line between what is human cellular, and between technology is more and more blurred. We will probably have vastly greater interfaces with biotechnological and digital interfaces. And by that I mean both AI. We will, some of us might be chimeras. We will be chimeras in the sense that our cells may be altered because we have a disease state. Our genes may be altered in those cells because we have a disease state. All of these are new humans. In fact, they're new humans walking, by this definition, they're new humans walking amongst us right now. There's some in this audience, as far as I could tell.
So generally humans, while the suicide rate is actually fairly high in the United States.
Back to the morbid conversation.
But there's the desire to live seems to be a relatively common human desire.
Yes.
To live longer. Ponce de Leon looked for the Fountain of Youth. He didn't find it, though he didn't look in the right part of Florida. He was not in Palm Beach. He was looking in Miami, I guess, or something. So Just give me some free medical advice if you want, if you could. So, if I want to live to be 100 years old, have all my faculties, and by the way, is Alzheimer's and dementia on the rise because people are living longer, or just
Alzheimer's is also on the rise, mostly because people are living longer. Yeah, there's no new toxin that we've discovered, as far as I know.
the best way to avoid getting Alzheimer's or dementia is to have good genes, or is there something else you could do?
Well, again, as I said, you know, you don't get to choose your genes.
Okay.
So there are this actually, again, this is going to be a longer answer. And it's biologically interesting. So it turns out that one of the things that happens, you can imagine if you look inside your brain and look at the anatomy of your brain, it looks like an incredibly complex arbor of trees with many, many branches all over. And the more densely arborized your brain is, the more healthy in some ways the brain is. What happens in virtually all of these neurodegenerative diseases is that the arborization, this dense branching, begins to decrease over time, and it falls on a slope.
Okay.
Now, here's the important piece. The best way, until we get new medicines for Alzheimer's disease, the best way to prevent the decay is you can't change the slope of the decay, but what you can do is you can move it to a higher place to start with. So in other words, the best way is to arborize your brain as much as possible when your brain is still intact. And that involves, you know, very basic things. Exercise, it involves thinking, it involves, you know, social interactions, coming to book festivals,
So reading books is a good thing?
Reading books is actually one of the best ways because
All right, so reading books is good. What about learning a musical instrument?
Incredibly good.
That's
Incredibly.
good.
Yeah.
Learning a foreign language, is that
Very good. All good.
crossword puzzles?
All good.
Okay.
You're on a roll.
Okay, so, all right, I'm going to try all those things tomorrow. But right now, sometimes doctors say, if you want to live a long life, take an aspirin every day. What do you think of that?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, I think, you know, as I said, aspirin is mainly a preventative for cardiovascular disease. It's probably got some other effects that we don't know fully about. But there are studies that show that if you do take a baby aspirin every day, that you know, it has good effects on cardiovascular health and therefore good effects.
I thought there was a study that came out not long ago saying, well, maybe that's not true.
Well, so, you know, if you do, there are studies that go one direction, studies that go the other direction. If you look at the global evidence, it tends to cause it doesn't cause harm, and if anything, there's a little bit of benefit.
What about taking a statin? Doctors like to tell people take statins. Suppose you don't really have high cholesterol. Is it still a good idea to take a statin every day?
Not a great deal of evidence that it prolongs your life. There are 2 or 3 very large ongoing studies to figure out whether, you know, taking statins, being on a calorie-restricted diet, being on diets that restrict insulin, and taking an aspirin, metformin, et cetera, all this kind of, I mean, I would say, woozy stuff that's out in the aging field right now. There's a lot of studies going on. None of them have reached any conclusive evidence.
What about walking 2 miles every day? Some people say that prolongs your life.
So as I said, you know, the simple things that you can do are the things I talked about. You know, simple exercise. You don't need to be running in the gym every day, but simple exercise.
But if you're walking 2 miles, does it make a difference on the treadmill, or you have to do it outside? Then the body won't know. It doesn't make a difference, does it?
But you know, it's not clear that your neurons care whether you're on the treadmill or whether you're in.
What about weight? Is it important to lose weight? And what do you think about Ozempic? You ever heard of this?
How much medical advice are you trying to get out of me?
All I can get for free. I mean, I don't know. I mean, should I be taking Ozempic? Everybody I know has on Ozempic. I mean, I'm the fattest person I know now.
Well, so you know, the drugs are new. They, I think, they're certainly successful in weight reduction. It's not clear. There's a worrisome trend that they also cause a loss of muscle. And so you're losing weight, but you're also losing muscle.
Oh, really?
I saw, as soon as I said that, I saw you standing up a little bit more straight to.
So there's a problem in losing muscle.
Yeah, so that's one problem. The thing is that, you know, whenever there's a new drug that comes out into the market, it becomes the new rage. Everyone's talking about it, and then 15 years later, you suddenly find out that you've lost, you know, muscle as long with your weight as well. And so we don't know. These drugs haven't been around for long enough for us to know. So in general, I tell people that if you're diabetic, if you're severely obese, and if you can manage to combine Ozempic with appropriate exercise that retains muscle, then okay, go ahead. That's a reasonable thing to do. But it's not, you know, you just don't. There's no free lunch. Literally, there's no free lunch. But so the drugs haven't been around for long enough for me to be able to tell you.
Okay, so what about getting an annual physical? Some people say that's a waste of money. Other people say it's essential. What do you think about that?
Well, so here's what I think about it, and my thoughts again are a little bit off the beaten track. You know, the evidence that an annual physical helps. So yes. So what do annual physicals catch? They catch things that are silent. So hypertension, big killer. An annual physical will catch that. They can catch, you know, things that you wouldn't normally know. For instance, having high cholesterol, hypercholesterolemia. An annual physical will catch if you suddenly start going along that road. So it will catch the possibility that you're having early signs. We now know that it will catch. Often physicians who are pretty attuned can catch early neurological disease, and then they'll say to you, you know, go and do some crosswords and don't take the you know.
Okay.
So the answer is annual physicals are very helpful to catch silent things that you would not normally catch. That's one. The second thing is I do think it's important to build a relationship with a doctor. That relationship is important because when you're in trouble, your physician becomes an advocate. So and it can become not just a medical advocate, but what I would say not in a religious sense, but a spiritual advocate.
Well, the relationship with a doctor, I think, is important. But nowadays, doctors want to have relationships on telemedicine. Would you call the doctor, maybe he looks at you or she looks at you on the screen? Is that as good as being examined in person?
No, for several reasons. Number one is that, you know, they can't they don't build a relationship with you, and I think that relationship becomes very important. I mean, I often deal with end of life issues. Many people do. Many primary physicians do. And I think that, you know, I think it's very important to have a relationship that's not virtual.
Well, end-of-life issues, like when you have somebody that probably is not going to live that much longer, you talk to the next of kin, and is that the toughest part of your job?
No, the toughest part of my job is to talk to the person who's dying, not the next of kin. The next of kin is the second toughest part of my job, but the toughest part of my job is to talk to the person themselves.
Okay, so in terms of the new human, 25 years from today, what do you think is going to be different about humans, or 50 years from today, than today?
Well, we talked a little bit about this. I mean, I think, you know, there will be we will be more readily altering ourselves. You know, one thing that's interesting is one project that's interesting that I'm involved in is to build an AI model of a cell. Can we build a virtual model of a cell? And if we could build a completely AI-based model of a cell, could we then use it to predict things about cellular behavior? And if we could use it to predict things about cellular behavior, could we then deploy it in a medical setting? Could we understand, for instance, why someone gets diabetes or someone gets hypertension or something like that? So, but back to your fundamental question, I think we will have a vastly more permissive understanding of how to change ourselves, how to potentially liaise or interface with our digital selves. We will be different people. We will be living different lives. Our homes will be different. And we talked a little bit also about our relationship with nature will be different.
Now, when I was growing up, doctors were very highly respected, and they were also very big income producers, relatively speaking.
Well, most of them, that's stopped because most people get free medical advice these days.
Right. That's good. But But doctors today, they seem to be dealing with insurance companies all the time. And would you recommend to the average person who has a scientific bent that he or she go to medical school? Do you think today we should get more people to go to medical schools? And do we need more medical schools to be built in this country?
Well, so I think medical school serves many purposes. One of the purposes is to make doctors, but the other purpose is to make doctors who are also scientists. And if we don't do that, if we don't build medical researchers, I think then we're in deeper trouble, because then, you know, all the things that we have taken for granted, the arrival, the birth of new medicines is just not going to happen. You need that sort of cohort of people to think through some of these.
As you look back on your career, you have no regret about going to medical school, right, and becoming a doctor and.
Oh, absolutely not. I think it's, you know, medicine is the most complex human profession that I know. It involves, you know, every faculty of reason, ranging from you know, as the Greeks would say, ethos to pathos, or as in a more modern sense, ranging from, you know, thinking about science and statistics and evidence to having a conversation with someone which is very deeply intimate and personal. Medicine has in some ways is a profession that has the widest range than any other profession that I know.
So if you're born in the United States, generally you probably have a longer lifespan potential than if you're born in, let's say, a so-called third world country. Do you think that will change in the next 50 years or so that countries that are lower income countries, let's say, they're likely to get the level of medical care and attention because of either artificial intelligence or telemedicine that we are able to get in the United States today?
It's not going to be artificial intelligence and telemedicine that transforms the aging of lower income countries. It is much simpler things, such as better hygiene, better sanitation, better diets, better access, and to some extent better access to medical care. Now, of course, you know, some of these may be tooled by or enabled by digital technologies, but the fundamental changes that we're seeing in places like, let's say, you know, India, Nigeria, the lower income countries are because you know, because of very fundamental things like, as I said, hygiene, sanitation, decreased infant mortality, decreased maternal mortality, you know, and vast changes which are much more basic than you know, complicated things like artificial intelligence and digital technologies.
Okay, so another question for my health knowledge. Is drinking alcohol or wine a good thing for you? Some people say drinking wine is a good thing for you. Some people say it's not so good. What is your view?
Well, so the evidence is now suggests that almost all alcohol is a problem, or any alcohol is a problem, which should make us drink more. But but the evidence suggests that that alcohol is an underestimated problem in most diseases, as opposed to an overestimated problem.
Even red wine?
Even red wine, which was once considered a good thing, is now no longer considered as good thing. So, so I don't know what your plan is this evening, but.
Well, okay, let me say, should I eat red meat? Is red meat healthy for you?
So the quick answer is it's not healthy for you. It's certainly not healthy for the environment. And so I would say that, you know, its effect on you is moderately bad. Its effects on the environment are extremely bad. So if you want to do the world a favor, you should probably not eat red meat. Not just for yourself, but for.
Am I likely to live longer if I become a vegan or a vegetarian, or you wouldn't say it's make that much difference?
It doesn't make much of a difference. But I think you know, as I said, once again, if you could commit, as I have tried to do, if you could commit 1 day a week to being a vegetarian, you would do not yourself, but your grandchildren a favor.
Well, I'm more worried about myself, but okay. Okay.
Well, it's nice to have grandchildren around if you happen to have them, or grandnephews or grandnieces. It doesn't matter. It would be nice to leave a better planet than the one we inherited.
So in the United States government provides an enormous amount of money for medical research. Do you think that money is
It doesn't provide an enormous amount of money. It provides $50 billion to the NIH for medical research, which is 1/100th of the amount of money that it spends on many other things.
you don't think it's enough?
Well, I think it's,
Okay.
it's a ludicrously small number.
All right. But the U.S. government provides a lot of reimbursement for medical treatment now.
So that's different. So it provides a lot of,
different, okay.
so it provides a lot of reimbursement. So it provides trillions of dollars for medical care, but $50 billion odd for medical research.
So if somebody said to you, look, why don't you come to the White House and
Oh, dear.
redo the way the federal government operates the healthcare system, what is the one or two things you would do to make the healthcare system in the United States work better for the average person?
I have two words: preventative health.
Preventive health. So you would get people to exercise more, or
So exactly. So you know, the health begins at the bottom. Health begins. The pyramid begins at the bottom. We would have a much more. We would have a much stronger preventative health program. We would, you know, instead of treating the well, instead of treating the sick, we would encourage wellness instead of treating the sick.
so in a lot of hospitals now, what they say is the best way for a hospital to make money is to have the patient come in and get out the same day, and don't stay there very long because the hospitals don't make much money on that. Is that good for healthcare treatment of people, or is that just good for the hospital bottom line?
So it's, you know, generally speaking, you don't want to be in the hospital for a long time because you can get nasty infections from being in the hospital because other people are sick. And so it is under the right circumstances, it's the right thing to do. You know, there are people who would say that, you know, it has gone to an extreme and they aren't able to get the care that they need or deserve.
So where do you think COVID came from?
Are you paying me for answering this question?
I'm just curious. Do you think it just came from a wet market, or you don't know? Nobody really knows, I guess, right?
I think no one really knows. I think they were pretty convinced that it came from the wet market. I think we have become relatively unconvinced that it came from the wet market. I think that we have become much more convinced than we were 1 year ago or 2 years ago, that we have become more convinced that it may have been a lab leak.
And what do you think about the argument that vaccines do not help when you have COVID?
I think that's absurd.
Absurd. Okay. And
Well, they don't help when you have COVID. That is true.
vaccines usually historically took, let's say, 4 to 7 years to
No,
develop.
but I mean that vaccines don't help when you have
Right.
when you have COVID. I certainly think that vaccines help to prevent
But,
you getting COVID.
all right, if the President of the United States called you and said, look, you're a very famous doctor, a famous author, you know a lot about science and medicine, I want to make sure if we have another pandemic, we do a better job. What would you tell the President of the United States that we should do one or two things better than we did last time?
So I would say that we need a better global surveillance network. We have disempowered the World Health Organization. We have disemboweled it for almost 2 decades. So we need a better global surveillance system. We need a better global response system. This pandemic could have been contained, as many pandemics had been before that. So, you know, there have been coronaviruses in the past. There's been MERS, there's been other coronaviruses. All of those pandemics that could have been pandemics were contained very quickly. This was a particular failure of global surveillance, global responsiveness, and global responsibility. For the first few months, as you very well know, the Chinese government hid a global pandemic from the globe. So I think and part of the reason that they could do that is because of geopolitics. So I would tell the president that while I do my homework on the medical front, the president may be well served by doing his or her homework on the geopolitical end, so that this doesn't happen again.
Okay, so you've mentioned NIH, $50 billion a year. If you could redirect the NIH in any way, what would you have them do that they're not doing now?
2 words: preventative health.
You like those two words, right?
I'm giving you free medical advice. So
Yeah,
I might as well.
I know. Okay, so preventative health. So what do you do to preventative your own health? Do you exercise a lot? Do you do crossword puzzles? What are you doing to make yourself healthy?
I do Wordle every day.
Okay, all right. But you exercise a lot, and you don't.
I do, I do my fair amount of exercise. It's not like I'm,
You're young.
I have other things to do. I'm trying to write books, but no, I get some exercise in. I think, I think that many things that, I don't do a lot of things, some of which are obvious. I don't smoke. I, limit.
You think smoking's not good for you?
Oh, I'm not the only person who thinks smoking is.
What about marijuana? Is marijuana healthy?
Depends who's asking.
Well, so you believe medical marijuana is presumably healthy?
So that's why I said depends who's asking. I think if it's if the situation is if there's a situation that concerns pain, I think it's I'm very open to prescribing medical marijuana.
Wow. Okay. So today, if you were to say what the most important medical advancement we've made over the last 100 years, what is it that this country and the medical world has done over the last 100 years that has made people healthier? Is it vaccines? Is the discovery of DNA? Is better sanitation? Better medical access to pills? What is the best thing we've done in the last 100 years?
Well, by best you mean quantitatively, correct?
Yes, what's done the most to make people live longer and healthier?
Yeah, so the best thing that we've done is really quite basic. It's sanitation. It's the fact that it's wastewater disposal. It is the invisible things that you don't see around you that allow the air to be clean, the water to be potable, and therefore the worst thing that we could be doing is to reverse those things, as we have been seeing more recently with, as I said, this is not a talk about climate, but it has become a talk about climate because, you've asked me many times about what maximum impact is. That seems to be an area of maximum impact.
So if I had the time to read one of your 3 books, I can only have time to read one of them. Which one?
I gave you all this advice. I mean, you should read all.
Well, I'm asking for
You
people
can
here.
buy 3 books.
If people here wanted to read one of your 3 books, which one would you recommend that they read first?
Well, okay. I mean, it depends on what their interests are. If they're interested in a kind of in a way to read them serially, they should read The Gene first. If they're interested in a personal experience with cancer, they should read The Emperor of All Maladies first. If they're thinking about sort of the medical future, they should read Song of the South first. It depends on what their interest is.
Look, I've actually read all 3 of your books, and they're excellent
I know
books.
you
I
have.
don't really understand science that well, but I actually understood pretty much what you wrote about, and it scared the hell out of me on some parts of it, but I realized I got to exercise more, not eat certain things, and do more Wordle, right?
Yes, that's correct. Those would be the take-home messages.
So thank you for the books you've written and the education you're giving to people about healthcare, and thank you for your service to our country through what you're doing and teaching.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Okay.